Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, and today I've got a lovely young lady. Her name is Elizabeth Karina. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Elizabeth is a dating expert and love coach, and she's actually a new guest to the podcast today. And she's got a really great topic for us to discuss around how we can end up sometimes sabotaging our relationships without even realizing that that's what we're doing. So, Karina, you did say that you got a personal experience around this topic and theme. So would you be happy to share that with our guests today? I mean, our audience, I should say, today.
Yeah. So I really came to this work because of my own struggles with just trying to find a partner and have a relationship that really worked for me and was really right for me. And so, in my early 20s, I just really had no idea what I was doing with love. And I was falling in love with these guys who then ended up being not really ready for commitment. And you might call them unavailable guys. And then I would end up being okay, well, I guess I can't get the one that I want. So then I'll just go with this guy who clearly really loves me, and that'll be safe. And I kind of ping-ponged between those two things until I started to get just really curious. I think it was the last heartbreak that I had in my later 20s. And I was just okay, there's definitely a pattern here. It can't just be that all these guys just suck and then it's just bad luck. So I started to be maybe it's something that I'm not getting, and there's something about me. I think I'm the common denominator. So I started to just look into what the heck is going on. I went to therapy. I was I think I've got some kind of a pattern. I don't know what it is. Please help me figure it out. And I just started looking into, I found coaches for the first time and took some programs and started to piece all the things together that had been in the way. And it turned out that the biggest thing was childhood stuff that I had thought didn't impact me. My dad had died when I was 5, and my mom had remarried. I'd grown up with my stepdad. And so I'd been oh no, that didn't really affect me. I'm totally fine. And when I started to realize this pattern with I just couldn't get love that I wanted. I was always falling for the guy who wasn't going to love me back. I started doing a little bit of more subconscious work and starting to dig into what's behind this pattern, and found out that it was a pattern with thinking that the guy that I really wanted was not going to want me. And subconsciously, I was going out there looking for a guy who would basically just replay this pattern, which was as a 5-year-old, the abandonment of my dad. So it was a lot deeper than what you would think.
Yeah, very brave of you as well, Elizabeth, to recognize, that at some point, anyway, that you were responsible for the results you was getting, and not sort of finger pointing and just saying, it's them, and all men are like that.
Yeah. I think that was a large part of the work was to just start to take that personal responsibility for what was showing up in my life. And actually that was the most freeing thing as well, because then it meant, well, actually, I have so much more control over this too. This means that I'm not just a victim to the next thing that happens to me with a guy, but I can look at how am I playing a role in this? So it was actually extremely empowering.
So let me just dig down a little bit for the benefit of the audience around what do you think were your thoughts or behaviors that contributed to you getting those guys initially that you weren't wanting in relationships, or that were ending up heartbreaking you in the end?
So for me, it was this pattern of one or the other. And it was all kind of at the subconscious level, but it had to do with really like what I was identifying as love. And so to me, love was like this like anxiety almost. Like if I was feeling this anxiousness around a guy and just like really worried if he was going to message me back, and if I started to get like all wrapped up in that, I'd be like, oh, I really like this guy, like, and this is like what it's supposed to feel like when you're falling in love, is this major fear that he's just going to disappear. And so if I wasn't feeling that, I just wasn't interested in the guy. I'd be like, oh no, there's no chemistry. There's no spark here. And so I think it was like two pieces. It was like that, what I was like kind of looking for when I was going out in terms of what I wanted to feel with the guy. And also then I would be showing up in just like not really a secure place either. So I would then end up being more needy and more like, there would just be things that would be coming out where I'm like trying to cling on to him in some way. And of course that's not attractive either. So I would be choosing these guys and then like playing out the behaviors that weren't even going to be helpful anyways. So it's like both things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women can probably relate to doing that at some point in their lives, and we can actually see that behavior from men too, can't we, in our relationships, where they come across as being quite needy or desperate or obsessed with you, and that, if you're on the receiving end of that, can feel quite, oh my gosh, if you're not really into them, it can make you want to run away from that relationship or get out of it as soon as possible because it doesn't feel comfortable. And so then you understand, if you've displayed those behaviors yourself in a relationship, why, for the guy, it can feel like something they don't want either.
Yeah. And so much of it it's like that all can be resolved with doing the really deep like healing work around, why do I not feel worthy of someone's love, and why do I not feel good enough, and like why do I not think he would just want me in his life, and why am I trying to fill this gap within me, and instead of coming from a totally different place, which is just this like already fullness, this already so worthy, so good enough. It's a totally different place to be coming from.
Yeah, I certainly, resonate very much with that, and having been through that sort of type of behavior in my previous relationships, probably going back a few decades ago now, but certainly, I can remember being that needy, desperate person that was feeling very unworthy and unloved, and then having to recognize and, like you say, heal that and understand that I was contributing to not getting the results I wanted in terms of a healthy relationship at that moment in time. So what did you actually have to do then in terms of any, I suppose, reprogramming, for want of a better word, or recognition around identifying that, I've been displaying these behaviors, I've been having these thoughts. How did you change that?
So it was a lot of just like healing work that I did. It started with doing the work around, I guess you could say, like my inner child, but that 5-year-old girl who had just felt abandoned by her father. And it was all subconscious. It wasn't something that I realized that I had been carrying around when I was like meeting guys. And I had, before finding that work, I had like done all the work around like, oh, like, what do guys want, and like how to communicate in this way that would attract him, and like all of that kind of stuff. And of course it didn't really work because it wasn't coming from just like confidence that I already had, or like feeling enough that I already had. So when I started to do that work, things just started to like really click. So really just healing that 5-year-old girl who had lost her dad, and then doing a lot of like work around just like self-love and self-acceptance. That was a huge piece and super healing, not just in my experience with men, but actually rippled out into like everywhere in my life, where I had, I was like the straight A student. I was always like, it would have seemed like, oh, like she's got everything together. And then inside there would be these parts, like just really not feeling good enough and not feeling like I really belong in some ways. And that had always been there. And so when I started to do that work, that's the really deep, like reprogramming work around just like how I had my relationship with myself, and like how I saw myself and how I talked to myself. And that was such a huge piece. And then the other piece was starting to really just question the stories that I was telling myself about, oh, he did this, this means this, because I had these automatic things I would be jumping to. He didn't text right away, he's not interested. And so starting to untangle just the stories that I had going on too about what things meant, because I would always jump to these certain scenarios and it didn't actually have to mean that. So that was the other piece as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one that you mentioned about, the text situation, because as well as that, I think a lot of people tend to think, let's talk in the context of opposite sex type relationships, if you're a woman that's attracted to men and vice versa, that, the way you speak to men and what you understand about men is the same as what you understand about women and the way you speak to women. And that's not the case, because obviously men are very different in the way they think, the way they behave, and the way they act. So, certainly, I think sometimes, we can have conversations with other women thinking that, and know that will be received great, but probably have the same conversation with a man and it be received completely differently because they're a man, and we don't understand that they are receiving that information totally different, just purely because they are different. Their brains are different, their behaviors are different. I keep saying this, but men are not hairy women.
Yes, I say that
too. and sometimes it isn't healthy for us to think that men understand things in the same way as women do.
Yeah. And that was, I feel like the two things were combined to me, like me not feeling good enough, and then also how I was interpreting like things that men were doing. And I grew up with two brothers, so like I was like, I have a pretty good understanding, and there was a lot more to learn, when I was carrying this thought that like also like, oh, maybe he's not really that interested in me, or like I'm like he's gonna disappear or whatever it was, then I'm looking there for like the evidence that would be true. And so the ways that I'm interpreting everything that he's doing and like, oh, how should I respond or not respond is just totally different. But yeah, one of the biggest things my clients bring to me is the stuff around texting and like communication. And it's always just so liberating for them to start to understand, oh, like he communicates for totally different reason than I do, and when he's going to respond and why he's going to respond, and even like the type of response I'm going to get, it may not be what I expect because he's actually not like my girlfriend, right? Like
exactly.
He's got a whole different mind around that. Yeah.
Exactly. I think most women will notice it now if they become more consciously aware that men usually respond in very short sentences, don't they? Whereas women, we tend to sort of have a whole couple of lines at least of each conversation of text, whereas a man will just probably respond yes, no, or a very short response normally, because they just want, that's how they're wired. That they just want to sort of get to the point very quickly. And sometimes we can take offense at that because we expect a bit more, a girly type response where there's a bit more information and context around it.
Yep. One of my favorite things to tell my clients is that when I started dating my fiance, we met at a dance workshop. He asked me to lunch afterwards. We go to lunch. We had a good time. He asked me right after that lunch, okay, can I take you out to dinner this weekend? So I'm like, okay, yeah. So we exchanged numbers, and then he never texted me that whole week. And so I was like, oh, he's probably like not interested, like maybe this isn't gonna happen. And so it's like the day of the date, and he had not confirmed with me, like nothing, and I was expecting, oh, he's gonna be like texting me, this is how he's gonna like make sure that I'm like still like building the rapport and the connection, and he didn't do any of that. So it's like the day of the date and he hasn't texted. And so I've been practicing not making things mean like bad things, So I was like, you know what? Like I can just text him and ask him, are we still on? And it like, I don't have to be mad about it. Like I can just be like, hey, are we still on? It doesn't have to mean anything. And so I did. And he's like, yeah, of course. Like, like we made plans. Like, of course we're going on this date. And so like with him, I had to like retrain my whole brain around what it would mean if a guy did or didn't text, because he is not a texter. He'd rather have a phone call, and he will if like he wants to communicate something, we're making plans, like that is what he would do. I don't think he started really texting me quite a bit till we were like several months into dating. And so like when my clients come to me and they're like, well, he's like not texting a lot, I'm like, it doesn't necessarily mean he's not interested.
Exactly.
To, like, pull those things apart.
Yeah, I mean, we do sort of, I suppose, default as women, because we're usually the ones that I suppose are more guilty and more invested at the start of a relationship, aren't we? We are wanting to actually move things along quite often faster than a man is ready for. And I think that can be sometimes an issue and a problem for men, and can frighten them off sometimes, as well as, be an issue and a problem for women who don't realize that can be a problem for men.
Yeah. He was just gonna like, I'm not overly committed right now. Like, I like you, we're gonna go on these dates, but it, a totally different experience to be with someone who was just like so centered in himself that he wasn't like chasing really. It was just like, yeah, I really like you. And I was wanting all of the excitement of like, oh, he's texting me all the time, and very different experience.
And it's good that by then, you'd learned, I suppose, and become more aware of the idea of not being attached to him not texting. It might have been difficult and might have been challenging for you not to want to reach out in between. And like you say, in the end, you did sort of drop him that text, but at least you hadn't sort of continually bombarded him up until that point.
Yeah, I think it can be hard, when we're not getting what we think we should or what we expect, to not just like completely wall off from the man either, and just be like, oh, well, I'm just done, and to actually like be willing to stay open to that connection, and like not needing it to be any certain way. I think that's such a huge part.
Literally, you hit the nail on the head there. It's letting go and surrendering, isn't it? And not being attached to the outcome, just letting it be, just let it play out, and even if he hadn't showed up, for example, that evening, even if you hadn't dropped him that text and he hadn't showed up for the date, not being attached to that, or not making it mean that, you're being rejected.
Yeah. So much of it is literally like, how are we just managing all of what's happening in our head? Like, what are we telling ourselves about it?
Exactly. So what do you think, I suppose, was one of your biggest learnings during your own journey towards, getting the result you did get in the end, in terms of, your happy relationship now that you're a fiance?
Yeah. I think, with my fiance, I think the biggest thing was, in the beginning, I still had a lot of that abandonment stuff coming up. And so I had like done enough work that I was like open and available for a man who, like, I wasn't afraid was going to leave me, and then finding that boring or uninteresting. But it's like, he's just this like secure guy. So I think a lot of it was just starting to rewrite, if you have like a more insecure attachment style, which mine tended towards like the fearful avoidant, which is that push pull. And this is why I would be falling for the guy who was not certain, because that was creating that kind of push pull dynamic. And really with him, like not pushing him away, like if he got too close, and then if there was like distance, suddenly I'm like, oh, like a little anxious. And so it was like really, really, really learning how to work with the parts of me that would be having those different reactions to what was going on, and not pushing him away, and not being like, oh, actually this is, I don't know, I want more of this excited feeling, and like starting to really rewrite like what was love in my nervous system, and like what does a relationship with a man feel like in my nervous system. And so he really helped me, actually, because he was so secure and so stable and so in his center, helped me start to rewire some of that programming and that, and then the help of the other work that I was doing alongside dating him. Because actually I did push him away a couple times. I did get really triggered from like past stuff coming up, and I don't know, he was willing to like work through whatever was coming up that was just me. And I had to learn how to be like, that actually wasn't him. Like I wanted to say that was him and he was the problem. He was the wrong one. And actually be able to navigate like, oh, wait, this is all my stuff that's coming up right now. I think that was really the biggest thing that I learned, and you know, be able to move towards that secure attachment.
Yeah. So would you be prepared to share one or two of those experiences of what you did that sort of pushed him away in those moments, and then what sort of brought him back? Because I think it's important to know as well, if you do sometimes push your man away, it doesn't mean it's the end of the relationship. You can, you know, salvage it. You know, it doesn't always mean, oh, this is going to end in heartbreak.
Yeah. So this is so classic, what you'll see with fearful avoidance sometimes, but he went away and he told me he was going away. This was maybe like 2 or 3 months into dating. And we were like, I kept it like pretty casual in the beginning because I was just like, this is a new experience, like feeling this way in relationship. And I was like, I don't know, do I like really like him? Like, what is this? And I was just kind of experimenting. Like every day to be like, oh, I like him more. Like, I really like who he is. Like, oh. And so I kept going with it. But then there was a part of me that wanted to push him away like the whole time. And I had to keep like guiding myself not to do that. And so he went away on like a work thing for a week, and he had told me he was doing that. But then that kind of comes up around the texting out. He like didn't call me, message me at all during that week. And he came back, and then he was like kind of wanting to be like close to me, and like I was upset that I hadn't heard from him for the whole week. And so I was just like, you know what, like now you want to be near me, and before I didn't hear from you. And so I basically just pushed him away. I was like, no, like I'm really mad right now, like I need to go. And so I just left. We were at a dance class because we took dance classes together the whole time. That's how we met. And so I was so upset, and they were like the two things, because it was like, why is he coming toward me? Like, I don't want that. And then also like, why did he text me or call me that whole week? So these like two things playing out. And I just went away, and I needed to like be by myself. And it took me 3 weeks to just like navigate what I was feeling and what had actually been going on. And in the past, I would have pushed a guy away, and that would have been it. There would never have been another door open for him. And so we were still taking a dance class together. So I was seeing him like every week anyways, but I like didn't want to talk to him. And he just respected that. And it was like, I think the third week, you know, I showed up to dance class, and like something had shifted internally, and I had just been observing how he was just so respecting the fact that I was like pulled away and wanting my space. And so I was like, you know what, like I'm going to practice some of this other stuff that I'm learning. And so I went up to him, and I was like, hey, like, can we talk? And he was like, yeah. Like, I think he'd even tried to talk to me before that, and I had just been like not available for that. And so we went out to my car, and I just explained to him like what had been going on internally for me, and what had been triggered by the two things that he had done. And we just had this like really open, honest conversation where I would probably not have been willing to do that with a guy up until that point. That would have been done, you know? And so we were like, okay, like, can we like clear the slate? Let's start over. And we did. And that was really the beginning of when I was like started to get like really serious about him, because I had opened up that had actually been me doing that had created the possibility.
Oh, so thank you for sharing that with us, because I think a lot of women listening to the podcast are going to relate to that completely. And I think it's quite important to realize that, you know, men's brains are quite compartmentalized, and, you know, relationships is a separate sort of compartment. So when they're away from you, they aren't necessarily focused on the relationship. They're actually, usually one thing at a time. And we say men aren't particularly good at multitasking, and that is the truth, because even though both genders both got masculine and feminine energy, if a man is very much in his masculine energy space and he's away from you, and it might be through work or pleasure or what, sporting event or whatever, it doesn't mean that he doesn't respect you or doesn't love you. He's just focused on that.
Yep.
For that week or 2 days or whatever it is. And we can get very challenged by that, because as women, our brains are more, and I love this analogy, that men's brains are more compartmentalized, like an apartment block, whereas women's are more like spaghetti. We haven't got separate rooms. So our emotions can be anywhere, anytime, and we can be sort of thinking and feeling, whether it's work, relationships, all at the same time. It's understanding that's one of the big differences, and not to let it be a trigger.
Yeah, so much. I've been, when working with clients, like a lot of the stuff that comes up is literally, he's just a man, and he is not operating the same way that you are. For him, he was like, that was a big deal, but I was gone, like like, of course I thought of you, but I was there and you were here, and you were doing your thing. He's thinking, oh, she doesn't want me to bother her. She's busy.
Yeah. And that's really what mindset we need to be in when we're not around him, is, to be that busy person. So we're not, having those unrealistic expectations on what we expect him to do to make us feel happy, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
It's creating our own happiness and knowing that, we can do things to keep ourselves busy. We can socialize with, when he's away, we can have our own, see it as an opportunity to have our, reconnect with our girlfriends, or take up a hobby that we might have neglected, or do something different that we've always wanted to do while he's away, that we haven't had a chance to explore before, and just know that everything is always fine. And have that mindset around it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that mindset. And then, there may be a part that's like, I'm with my friends and I'm having fun, and also I still want to hear from him. That would come up for me. And a lot of that is just being you can do the self-talk, you can do the work with that part. What part is that's coming up that's afraid that maybe he is really distancing from me, or doesn't care about me, or isn't thinking about me, and can you do that work for that part that's coming up, and then be okay, so we're okay, and then I can go back and I can be okay, I'm gonna go make my own plans, I'm gonna go fill my own time, and it's all okay, it's gonna be okay, it's not gonna be this disaster.
And it's trusting in that process, isn't it? I mean, how did he respond? Was he quite shocked that you, did he understand at the time why you gave him short shift and didn't speak to him, or weren't available to him for those few weeks, where I suppose in a way you were punishing him for not communicating with you while he was away?
Yeah, I think he was willing to be that I'm so sorry that's how you experienced it, and here, let me explain to you why that isn't really what it was, which is a total man thing. Because I'm not a bad guy. Let me explain to you. But what he was really good at, and that made all the difference in that conversation, was just reflecting back what he was hearing me say. And so he was really listening and just reflecting back. And he didn't get super, we sometimes women want to label that he's being defensive, but really he's just trying to help you understand I'm not a bad guy.
Yes.
But he didn't really do that. Back what he understood about what my experience with it had been, and I think that was what allowed me to just keep opening and instead of closing and shutting off. And he obviously had no idea that is how I was going to react. So
men, when they have time out, sorry, there was a bit of overlap there. I think men, when they have time out, especially probably after there's been a bit of a misunderstanding, shall we say, or a breakdown between you as a couple, can just more or less pick up where they left off. You know, they can have some time out and not even think there's an issue or a problem but in the meantime, because we've witnessed him go into his cave for a few days or go off for a few days and been non-communicative, I should say, we can, as women, can be threatened the whole time, can't we? And worrying ourselves silly when he's perfectly fine, and he just needs that time out to process and re-energize and reground himself, and then he more or less they come back as though, what's the problem?
Nothing happens. What are you talking about?
Yeah and that again is just understanding that's the difference between, one of the many differences, I should say, between how men behave and how women behave, and how there can be some big misunderstandings on the back of these big differences sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So would you be prepared to share the other thing that was an issue?
Yeah. So that was actually, we met at a dance workshop, and he'd asked me to lunch, and then he'd asked me to dinner, later that week. And so we went on 3 dates, and I had been willing to do 3 dates just to see, okay, will there be a connection? Will the chemistry grow? And I remember being like, okay, he's like a super nice guy. He's like all the things that I really want, except for I just don't feel like the crazy spark chemistry. And as I had mentioned, for me, that was, and this is often the case, is when we're looking for that's some old pattern or some old blueprint that comes from childhood that's created that this is what love is supposed to feel like. This is how I'm supposed to feel. And if in the past that has ended you with relationships that were not healthy and not good, or not really the right person, which was my case, I'd been unsuccessful really all up until that point, that usually when you're looking for that feeling, it's not really the feeling to be looking for. Because that's just going to end you back up in the same pattern. For me, that would have been the unavailable guy. And so we went on 3 dates, and I was just like, I'm just not feeling the thing that I want to feel. And I remember like the 3rd date, we're sitting at the table, and I was kind of upset about something, and he was listening and just really caring about how I was feeling. And for some reason that actually triggered me in the wrong direction. And I was like, why is he so nice? I don't know. But there was a subconscious stuff going on about that not being what it should have been, or there was a whole subconscious thing going on underneath that would then push away a guy who's actually being super amazing. And so we went on that date, and I went home, and I was like, no, he's not the one. And I remember my roommate, who had gotten engaged recently, her fiance was over, and when I first started dating Eric, my fiance, he had been like, oh, show me his picture, I want to see his picture. So we found him on Facebook, and he looked at him, he was like, oh, he's a really nice guy, he's gonna be the one. He told that to me. So then we go on these 3 dates, and I'm like, no, just not feeling it. So I literally ghosted him. He had messaged me a day or so after that 3rd date, and I literally did not respond. And at that point, we weren't taking dance classes together. We had just done the workshop. And so I think it was maybe a month or a month and a half that went by, and I continued to do that, just work on myself. And he actually ended up showing up at the actual dance class that I took every week. He showed up in the dance class. And I remember being like, oh, this is so awkward. I can't believe he's here. And he says he saw me and sort of felt the same way, oh my God, she's here. So I was attracted to him. I did think he was super handsome and cute. And I did like who he was, but this part of me was pushing him away. And so we just started getting to know each other in a more relaxed way through just the dance class. And I think he asked me out at least 3 times before I finally agreed to go out with him again. But the whole time we'd been building this rapport and flirting, and I had just had to dip my toe in little bit by little bit before I was comfortable to go on another date. And it was like that. It was like kind of stop, go like that until that moment in the car. And that was months later. So he really liked me. I guess he saw something in me that he just wasn't going to give up, which is what I will tell my clients, is that when a man sees the woman that he really wants, he's not just going to give up so easily. You can push him away. you can be not interested, and he's not just going to give up.
That's true. And I think sometimes as women, we can automatically think that if we rock the boat a little bit, then, we're going to sabotage that relationship forever. But actually, men enjoy a little bit of a challenge, so don't be afraid to rock the boat. Don't be afraid to, not be available or, need some time out, because like you say, what's meant for you will come for you.
Yeah, 100%. We even ran into each other before that dance class on a train late one night going home. And I had never run into another guy that I dated. And I dated a lot of guys in the city ever after the date, after we stopped dating. So I was like, wow, these are like signs from the universe here.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and, certainly as women, I think we tend to think, oh, well, we'll sometimes tolerate unacceptable behavior from men from a point of view of thinking we don't want to rock the boat, when actually men like you to challenge them a little bit. They like you to show up as a high value woman, and if something isn't acceptable about them, don't be afraid to sort of nip things in the bud, and they'll respect that. They might not like it at the time, but they'll certainly respect it and think, wow, my God, she's different to other women I've met, and actually, they want to show up even better for you next time. In fact, on the back of that, won't they?
Yeah, 100%. If you're not saying something, that's coming through.
Definitely.
If there's something that you need, and you also want to find out, can he change? Is he willing to hear me? How does he respond when I tell him these things? And so I was looking for that too. What happens if I say this or do this? Is he able to handle that? And how does he respond to it?
Absolutely. I think as long as you don't make it about him, but around what you want. I've said this before, if, for example, if you want somebody that's a non-smoker and he's a smoker, you don't say, I want you to quit smoking. What you say is, I really want to be with a man who doesn't smoke because I'm really into my health. And then it's up to him to decide whether he wants to, meet that need and that want for you. And then it's up to you as well to decide, if he doesn't quit, whether you're going to accept that or not, as the case may be. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't change anyone, and that's not the way we want to go into it either. So you would just want to know, this is what I want, and we'll see.
Exactly. But what you're
going to be it or not.
What you usually find is the man will, if he's really into you, he'll want to quit. He definitely will.
Yeah.
If he has a habit that you don't like, he'll quit for you. But it's making it about what you want, not about him, is the way to express that want. So, Elizabeth, for the benefit of the audience, what would be your best contact information that you could share with them for today?
Yeah, I think the best place to find me is on Facebook. So you can find me at Elizabeth Karina. That's probably the best place to connect with me. I have a Facebook group where I do a lot of trainings and just share a lot of things in that group. So if you find me through Facebook, you can find me at Elizabeth Karina Coaching, and that group is attached to that page as well. So that's where I would recommend you go.
Excellent. So thank you so much for being so open to sharing your personal experiences around your dating and your challenges with dating on this particular episode. I really appreciate that, Elizabeth.
Yeah, happy to.
So it just leaves for me to say then, listeners, in regards to your heart, we need to open our hearts to find true love, because that's where true love starts. So until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith inspirational speaker at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.